What about second breakfast?
Greetings. Welcome to This, That, and the Other, where I react to, respond to, comment on, question, or otherwise propound on whatever I find of interest on any given day. Now, today's topic Hello again. For a change, let's just jump right in. I got plenty of the digressions for later. Now, we've had adventures and faced danger. And it's time for a little rest. Reaching Bree, events in the book transpire much as in the movie, but with much more content and detail as usual.
What do you want?
I'm heading to the Prancing Pony.
Hobbits? Four hobbits? What's more out of the Shire by your talk? What business brings you to Bree?
We wish to stay at the inn. Our business is our own.
All right, young sir, I meant no offence. It's my job to ask questions after nightfall. There's talk of strange folk abroad.
Strange folk? Can't get much stranger than a movie director. Now, a few of the events in the inn were a little different. For instance, Barliman's story.
Big grey beard, pointy hat. Not seen him for 6 months.
Gandalf was there 3 months earlier, not 6, and actually told Barliman that Frodo would be coming and using the alias Underhill. Strider approached Frodo before Pippin had much of a chance to cause trouble. Frodo jumped up on a table to distract the crowd from Pippin and gave a small speech about how he was there to collect information for a book he was writing, and sang a nonsense song about a cow jumping over the moon. Nervously toying with the ring and losing his balance, he found the ring somehow ended up on his finger. Poof! He was gone. He crawled under the tables over to Strider's corner and reappeared there. Anyway, this is close enough. There's a lot more, of course, but much of it isn't very important. Oh yes, the sword that Aragorn carries is Narsil, Isildur's sword that was broken 3,000 years ago, not a newer, full-bladed one. That sword wasn't just lying in a shrine in Rivendell. Now, the Nazgul invasion happened with the decoy beds, but not mentioned is the fact that all the horses in the stable bolted, including the Hobbit's ponies. If I forgot to mention it before, the whole trip from Crick Hollow to Bree was on horseback, or ponyback. An explanation of how Sam obtained the pony named Bill, who was set free at Moria, is included in the following book section, but not in the film. Aragorn explains what Nazgul are, the 9 rings and the 9 men and all that, and issues an ominous warning.
What are they?
There were once men, great kings of men. Then Sauron the Deceiver gave to them 9 rings of power. Blinded by their greed, they took them without question, one by one, falling into darkness. And now they are slaves to his will. They are the Nazgul, ring wraiths, neither living nor dead. At all times they feel the presence of the ring, drawn to the power of the one. They will never stop hunting you.
Now, again, some reactors don't pay attention or forget this, prompting the same questions later on. There's a long story of Gandalf leaving a message for Frodo with Barliman, and a lot more about Strider, including revealing his real name. And there's another 30 or 40 minutes of screen time that could be taken up with all the backstory and exposition included on these pages. But it's all sitting around talking, therefore too boring to film. but it sure would answer a lot of reactors' questions. Now, Tolkien mentions back in the prologue that hobbits enjoy 6 meals a day when they can get them.
Gentlemen, we do not stop till nightfall.
What about breakfast?
We've already had it.
We've had one, yes. What about second breakfast? Don't think he knows about second breakfast, Pip. What about elevensies? Luncheon, afternoon tea, dinner, supper. He knows about them, doesn't he?
I wouldn't count on it.
Now, Pippin here rattles off 7. Maybe he's just greedy or hungrier than most. And come on, Pippin, do you really think apples fall from the sky? Now, believe it or not, Aragorn did sing the Lay of Luthien, or at least part of it, obviously reflecting on his relationship with Arwen.
Who is she? This woman you sing of.
'Tis the Lay of Luthien, the elf maiden who gave her love to Beren, a mortal.
What happened to her?
She died.
Now, repeat, all of Saruman and Orc's business here and in upcoming scenes is made up by Jackson, including Gandalf's continued imprisonment. Saruman only shows up in the book once, when Gandalf first goes to Isengard. As mentioned before, Gandalf's real story comes out at the Council of Elrond. Now, even the Weathertop business is far more complicated than shown on film. Boy, is it ever. Now, there are minor differences in the events on Weathertop, but nothing to get excited about. But where did Aragorn get those swords?
I'm going to have a look around.
Now, the company did build a small fire, but it wasn't on top of the hill, but down the north face away from the road. Here's a comment on the reactions, like I keep saying is the reason for this series. Now, as Frodo was lying there with one of the Nazgul approaching, too many viewers are screaming at him to put the ring on so he wouldn't be seen. Again, they seem to have not paid attention to what they've been told or have forgotten what they've been told. That the ring draws the Nazgul to it, and it makes the bearer even more visible to them. At least there were some who were screaming at the screen not to put it on. And Gandalf picking up his cell moth and calling an Uber Eagle is not in the book. The orc birthing scenes elicit almost as many "yeah" comments as Hobbit feet. Now, prepare for the most major storyline modification in the entire saga. After Frodo is wounded and Aragorn tries to find healing herbs, an elf shows up. It is Glorfindel. Who, I hear you ask? Glorfindel, a high-ranking elf from Elrond's house in Rivendell. Who it definitely is not is Arwen. The manner of their meeting was totally different and occurred a few days later. I warned you there would be digressions, and this one is a doozy. Arwen barely appears in the books at all. She's only in 4 short scenes and only speaks in one of them. She's referenced 3 or 4 other times. In total, she's in maybe 5 pages out of almost 1,100, and none of them are in the movie. None of the visions and dreams are in the books, nor any of her talks with Elrond. The flashbacks are from the appendices of The Return of the King. The appendices contain a lot of background, including the full story of Aragorn and Arwen, and are yet another reason why you must read the books to fully appreciate the films. Now, apparently, Jackson was concerned that out of a cast of thousands, literally, there were only 2 female characters. He wanted another one. Now, Glorfindel doesn't show up again, except once he was just sitting in the background. And Arwen was just hanging around doing nothing. So, being Elrond's daughter and Aragorn's betrothed, she was the obvious choice. Actually, when you think about it, it's rather curious that Tolkien didn't include her more, considering how important she is to Aragorn's motivations. But since she does appear in the film, here at her first rather angelic appearance, I'd like to visit Tolkien's description of her. Quote, "A lady fair to look upon. Young she was, and yet not so. Her white arms and clear face were flawless and smooth, and the light of stars was in her bright eyes, gray as a cloudless night. Yet queenly she looked, and thought and knowledge were in her glance, as of one who has known many things that the years bring." Unquote. Anyway, Frodo was mounted on Asphaleth, Glorfindel's horse. They kept that. The entire company continued toward Rivendell on foot, leading Frodo on the horse. It's only when they approach the ford of Bruinen that the riders show themselves and things get exciting. Glorfindel shouts, "Norolim, Norolim, Asphaleth," same as Arwen when she and Frodo leave, except she said Norolim, Asphaleth, Norolim. But that's about the worst nitpicking I've ever heard. But at this point, no one in the story, except Aragorn, or watching it, has any idea who Arwen is. Although Sam does recognize
She's an elf.
many reactors that it seems like Arwen and Aragorn know each other. To refer to previous comments regarding the appendices. The horse and hobbit make it across the river. As the Nazgul start across, the river rises up and a wall of water comes rushing downstream, and with waves having the appearance of white horses. The black horses panic, and with Aragorn, Glorfindel, and the hobbits on the other bank carrying flaming brands, they're filled with madness and end up being washed away in the flood. Questions arose, both here and back at the Buckleberry Ferry, about whether the black riders and their horses had some sort of aversion to water. Now, the chase to the ferry wasn't in the book, so no explanation was ever given. The Nazgul, being wraiths, probably couldn't be defeated simply by drowning them. The horses, however, were living flesh and blood animals. At the ferry, I suspect the riders likely held the horses back since they didn't know how deep the water was and didn't want to risk losing their means of transportation. You'll have to ask Peter Jackson, since he's the one that invented the whole scene. At the ford, the horses did indeed start across the river when the flood was unleashed and were washed away, rendering the Nazgul greatly inconvenienced. The questions were asked about Arwen having some sort of power over the river. No, but her father Elrond did. See, the river was the border of Rivendell, and under an enchantment. The touch of the Nazgul triggered the flood, but Gandalf got a little artsy and added the white horses. And a question about Arwen caring so much about Frodo and seemingly praying for him at the ford, or whatever elves do. The common statement is along the lines of, wait, she only just met him. I'm starting to sound like a broken record, but pay attention to what's going on in the movie. Arwen told Aragorn she's been out looking for them for 2 days. Elrond knew about the mission and sent his people out to find the company and help them. Then, in a sentence like Tolkien used to close many chapters, Frodo, quote, heard and saw no more. End quote. End of book 1. I meant to point this out back at the very beginning, but seemed to have forgotten. Yeah, even I can forget things. The Lord of the Rings was written as 6 books, published in 3 volumes, under one title to rule them all. Yeah, sorry, it's rather feeble. Rivendell. Frodo awakes in a strange room. Surprise, surprise, Gandalf is there. having escaped Saruman's clutches, as we will be told about in a while, but we already know. This time travel narration is so confusing.
Yes.
Gandalf fills Frodo in on what happened at the ford and over the past 3 days that Frodo has been unconscious. They touch briefly on Strider's true heritage. The next day was full of feasting, singing, general all-around good times. The group Hobbit hug isn't there as such, and Frodo's long-awaited reunion with Bilbo was under different circumstances. But the screen version is there in spirit and takes a lot less time.
Bilbo!
Hello, Frodo, my lad.
Bilbo!
Oh.
At the main feast, we get our first look at Elrond, although we've seen him before 3,000 years ago. And it's the first time we see Arwen and get to read her description. There's much chit-chat before, during, and after the feast. Frodo meets Gloin, one of Bilbo's dwarf companions, and they catch up on the news from up north. Now, the text for a few pages here is trivial and confusing as to who's where and when talking to whom about what and what. Yeah. Bilbo finishes and recites the poem or song he wrote for the occasion. I'm never sure what to call these things. Tolkien calls them songs, but to me they're more like poems, lacking in melody. But he's a man, so it's songs. It's late. Bilbo takes a last walk under the stars and turns in. Serious business would soon begin. And it's late for us as well. So we will also take a last walk under the stars and prepare for one of the main turning points of the entire story, the Council of Elrond. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you then.